Okay, Leslie.
Good afternoon. I'm Leslie Warner, and I'm Assistant Director of Tufts Alumni Career Services. Welcome to today's webinar, Working in the Gig Economy. I'm going to have a little bit of an introduction and some housekeeping, and then I'll introduce our terrific speaker. Tell you a little bit about Tufts Alumni Career Services. We have three main goals. One is to present programs like this, including webinars and, once we're able to again, in-person networking and informational events for all alumni, all schools. And we've increased our number of webinars and new topics to help you during this challenging time. In fact, we're going to continue to add new programs throughout the summer, so check our website for new programs being scheduled, as well as archived recordings of earlier webinars. Next Wednesday at 1 o'clock will be LinkedIn, and with us focus on LinkedIn and using it to connect with Tufts alumni, as well as other folks in your field or industry, and how to present the most robust profile. Our second goal is fostering networking and connections between alumni and students, including a new online resource called The Herd, and that is for alumni to alumni networking and alumni mentoring students. So you can share your experience with others, you can learn from others. We're really excited about this platform. You'll see links for it in all of our emails, as well as finding it on our website. And the third thing that we do is provide individual career coaching services for all graduates of Arts, Sciences, and Engineering and SMFA. Now, for today's webinar, we're going to be presenting, primarily Ingrid, our speaker, from 1 until about 2:15, and the last 15 minutes more focused on your questions. But please type your questions into the chat bubble anytime during the presentation. I'll be monitoring the chat questions coming in, and our presenter will be sure to address them by the end of the webinar. You'll see various options at usually it's the bottom of your screen. On some devices, it might be the top of your screen. And the chat looks like a cartoon bubble, like a thought bubble or a speech bubble. And when you click on it, you want to think about who you're writing your chat to, and you can write it to all of the presenters. That's myself and Ingrid and Nicole Anderson, who's behind the scenes helping with tech and access. Or you can write it to all participants if you don't mind everyone seeing your question. What I'll be doing is repeating the questions out loud so Ingrid can focus on what she's talking about with you and help you with those questions. Also, if you're having technical or access issues, you can put that in the chat, but you can do that just to the presenters. We are recording this webinar, and it will be posted on our YouTube playlist, hopefully within a week, but very soon. Now, let's get started by telling you about our presenter. I have known Ingrid Goldbloom Bloch for, we were trying to count. It's definitely over 15 years. It might be more than 20. We first met, I think it was at a professional association, but then soon and around that time, we realized we were both working for the same outplacement career coaching organization, just in different divisions, different functions. And we discovered we had a lot of connections and synchronicity in how we like to approach our work. So I've relied on her, and we've helped each other with work questions, resource questions, client questions over the years. And I've also hired her to present workshops to Tufts audiences, and she's worked for a number of other Tufts schools and programs as well, presenting workshops, sharing her creativity, her breadth of knowledge. I'll tell you a little bit about where that breadth of knowledge comes from. She has over 20 years of combined experience, starting out in marketing and advertising, but then moving into counseling, career coaching, creative thinking. And through her own business, Mosaic Careers, she helped hundreds of people transform their lives and careers and expand their businesses. She applies design thinking principles. Some of you may have heard about that. If you haven't, you can Google it later. It's a lot of fun to learn more about, and has applications to all of us and not just to product design. Her current portfolio of gigs includes working as Director of Talent Advancement at AAFCPAs, a CPA and consulting firm, and she speaks and trains on career-related topics like this, and she provides coaching to individuals and creates sculptures using upcycled and recycled materials. So yes, she's a busy person. Had training from a master's degree in counseling psych to advanced training in career development and structural consulting. And I think you're really going to enjoy this because in addition to really thoughtful, well-researched information, both from current thinkers and writers on the topic and from her own experiences, she's also a lot of fun, engaging presenter. So welcome, Ingrid Goldbloom Bloch.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction, Leslie. And what a nice testimonial for the power of networking, because, you know, we met each other at various times in our career, and it might have been years later before we started trading business opportunities. So for the next hour or so, I know we're getting started a little bit later, I'm going to talk to you about what it looks like to maybe work in the gig economy, and I call it creating a portfolio career. So like a portfolio, a financial portfolio where you diversify your assets, working the gig economy and creating a portfolio career means that you have more than one asset, more than one income stream. So altogether creates your portfolio of work. So I'm going to be referring to the gig economy and portfolio career sort of interchangeably and throughout the presentation. And if you have a question or you're confused, please, like Leslie said, type it into the chat. Leslie, feel free to interrupt me if it seems that people aren't, you know, I'm not clear in my instructions or what I'm talking about. And I'm really looking forward to opening up your eyes to the wonderful possibilities that are in front of you in terms of non-traditional work. So let's get started. I wanted to talk to you about gig economy and the portfolio career, and especially this topic couldn't have come at a better time. I'm sure that you're all being tested in some way in your career, in your work, your job search, and this is a time for creative thinking. And a lot of people say, well, I'm not a creative thinker. And I'm not asking you to be a wild, crazy artist. I'm just asking you to tweak a little bit about how you're thinking about the world of work. And my goal is by the end of this hour, you will find some excitement and hope into what your opportunities are versus feeling sort of stuck. And this is a perfect time to be thinking about adding some side gigs and expanding your network. So I'm hoping that you will really discover what's possible for you. So the one employer for life concept is very unique. It was this little bubble in time. If you think about your parents, grandparents, people often had side gigs, side things to bring in extra money. The early barbershop, I had so much fun looking up early side gigs. Early barbershops did everything from a nice haircut and a shave to leech treatments and bloodletting to giving enemas to even teeth extraction. So here's somebody that had multiple ways to make money all under that little red and white barber stripe. And actually that is still a symbol of the clean white cloth and the bloodletting if you want a little history lesson. So I want to start this by asking you all a question. And this is, do you generate more than one source of income? And that second source of income does not mean that it has to be enough to buy a house, just do you have more than one income stream? And we don't have anybody answering.
So Ingrid, we should find the polling option. Do we have to click something at the bottom of the screen to have it show up?
So I have it, it's on. We are polling. People are, let's see.
Are they writing?
Are answering. We have 24, 25.
Oh.
Show here, okay. Can you see the results?
No.
Poll results? Let me see. Can you see
there
now?
Okay, so a mixture, and actually more yes than no or no answers. So I wish I could talk to all of you to learn more about your other sources of income with these little side gigs. But throughout your career longevity, it's really unlikely that you're going to spend your entire career in one industry, let alone one company. And as the world is changing faster than ever before and things are happening at an unprecedented pace and in a new way, I want to preface this talk by saying a lot of the research that I've done on this was pre-coronavirus. New articles are coming up daily. I was reading new things yesterday. But this is a time, in fact, that places are more open to these project work or other work arrangements because it's being thrust upon the world of work today. So if anything, I think there will be more gig opportunities in the future. And as the world is changing, it's really important that you have diversification across your skills because it keeps you nimble and relevant. So I also start by saying there's no one thing as that perfect job. And that's okay. It's very unlikely that one job is going to provide everything you need to be happy and healthy and growing and inspired throughout your entire career. So we'll talk about how the world is changing, how people's identity is tied to their work, and then I'll go into the details of a gig economy and a portfolio career and how you can start creating this for yourself or testing the waters to see if this is something that you're interested in. So I like to think about the gig economy as that space between full-time employment and entrepreneurship. And it can take on many forms. It can take on a task, TaskRabbit or an Uber, which is a ride, or it could take on the form of a project or a service that you offer. But it is that space between you going off and working for one employer, that's maybe your main gig, and you having your own business. And I got that quote from Kathy Robinson at Turning Point Boston. And then, as I mentioned earlier, a portfolio career is really diversification. So you have a variety of ways to express yourself. As Leslie mentioned, I work in a more corporate environment. I also do speaking. It's my acting career gone into corporate training. And I also express myself through my art, making mixed media sculptures. So there's no one career that sort of encapsulates everything I want to do. So instead, I find pieces, sort of like friends. You have your friends that you have the serious conversations with and your fun friends that are lighthearted. That's how I think of a career, that you have to get these multiple inputs through either money-making endeavors or hobbies throughout your life. So as Leslie mentioned, I currently work as the Director of Talent Advancement at AAFCPAs, which is a accounting and consulting firm. And this is a new gig for me. I decided as life changes, there's times where you increase a gig, decrease a gig, add something to sort of follow along with whatever your life is. And so I left my own business, Mosaic Careers, reduced that gig to be smaller so I could take on a full-time gig. But on top of that, I'm still doing these speaking engagements, and I would love any opportunities to speak. I love speaking and training and teaching. And then I make art out of upcycled and recycled material. And I say that I do that not only as a point of interest, but the ability to sort of put together objects in new and creative ways is how I think about my work with clients, is how can people think about all of their different skills or their different interests and put them together to create a body of work. And so I really invite you that if you have tapes in your head about all the different ways that you like to work or that you're interested in, that there are ways to blend them. And as Leslie mentioned, the Alumni Career Services offers for, depending on your school, individualized career planning. And Leslie could pick up this could be the start, and you could continue to expand on creating gigs. Questions so far? I'm just getting started. Okay. So how has the world of work changed? And over the last 20 years, it's been dramatic. You're in the process of watching it change dramatically right now. But in the 1980s, things changed where that whole sort of one employer for life, job stability, loyalty, being able to depend on an income, sort of putting away your dreams or your interests to work first, play later. And as the generations have changed, now there's 5 generations working together in one place. There's a multi-generational workforce. Each generation comes up through different economic times. So it's much more common as a millennial to switch jobs more often, play first, work later, work from home, be more open to the flexible work environment. And where society in the 50s, you had that traditional job, the 80s, it turned out that you couldn't necessarily depend on a job. Now it's very acceptable from the societal norms to have a portfolio career, to have flexible work arrangements, to have side gigs. People talk to you and say, what else do you do? So it's really now focused about outcome versus hours. What is it that you can offer? What kind of skill do you bring? What kind of project can you help with? What is your value that you can bring to somebody? So when you start thinking about a portfolio career, I like to think about it in a few different buckets. The first bucket is really looking at the same title, but it has a different quality. So by necessity, some firms have outsourced jobs to become more contract related. Other times people want to do it themselves. Where at our current firm, we have a managed accounting services. So you might have been a CFO somewhere, and now you can do a gig as a CFO for a short-term project, or it's one of your gigs where you're working as a outsourced CFO for a company. So it's the same title, but it is more of a contract. And then you as a professional can flex as you need, as your life requirements. I took this full-time job because I now need to get 2 kids through college. At other times, I might increase my art and decrease this. Same thing with a company. They can flex up and flex down based on their needs and the workflow. So it's a much more economical way to work. Another is that you can be on a platform. So you are connected to contracts, contractors to clients, clients to contractors through some kind of platform. And I'm going to walk you through how to find these platforms. There's hundreds of platforms out there. And what's nice about them is that you don't have to sort of hunt for clients, and they take a small fee. And it is not just for menial labor type tasks. While nothing's wrong with moving furniture and doing meal delivery or driving an Uber, there are ways for you to do UX design or career coaching or other types of professional services using a platform. Another way is just you offering freelance. So let's say you're really strong with math and you want to start offering tutoring services, or I freelance, I offer some art classes to the neighborhood kids. There's many different ways that you freelance, but it takes the form of some kind of service that you're offering, whether it's landscaping, whether it's elder care, whether it's some kind of tutoring or coaching. And in that freelance, you're the one creating the business, and there's no middle person. And then the final, and this is what I have and what I want to offer to you, is some sort of combination where you have an anchor gig. And what I mean by an anchor gig is that one thing that gives you a little bit more stability, that bread and butter. So do you have something, maybe it's not your dream job, but it provides enough hours that you're getting the benefits that you need or the stability that you need so you can explore something else. I know of an example. I was speaking with Nicole while I was putting this together of a young Tufts alum who was doing a more sales-oriented IT job and was really interested in moving into something more creative. So while this gentleman was working at his job that was okay, you know, it paid the bills, he took some extra classes in UX design, started networking with people, and then offering to do some UX design, not necessarily at a full fee that a designer would get, but to build out his portfolio, increase his network, and get projects. And through that was able to transition and slowly increase the UX portion and decrease the sales. So that's what I mean by having that anchor. It's the anchor tenant. Think of a mall where there's like a Nordstrom's or a Sears is that anchor tenant. And then you might have a platform. So you might be on Upwork or selling, I could sell my art on Etsy or some other way where I'm not having to think about it, but you can get a little bit of that passive income. And then maybe taking something that you're already giving away for free. Maybe you are the go-to person for vegan cooking, or you're the go-to person for tailoring, and you monetize that. So it doesn't have to be one thing. And so I'm hoping that by the end of this hour, you feel confident that you could sort of dip your toe into either freelance platform or contract work, or think about changing the combination in which you work. So one of the things that I've noticed, and I'm going to put this out to all of you, actually, I'm going to come back to this slide. So when we were putting out our polling questions, I kept updating last minute, so I had difficulty getting the poll. So I'm going to ask this out to you, and I want you to put into the text to Leslie, A, B, or C. So are you interested in this topic today? Are you on here with me today because you think this is cool and it's interesting and you'd really love to try to work in a new way? Are you feeling desperate and you're thinking, I need to have more than one income, I don't make enough money, or I'm not going to get a job, so you're thinking this is out of necessity, or you're just not sure if this is going to be out of necessity or you're interested? So I'll wait a minute for those questions to come up. Leslie, what are you seeing?
I'm a few answers are coming in. I see 3 A's. It seems interesting and cool. 2 B's, now 3 B's. It's necessity. And one of the B person put a note, age late 50s, which
Yeah.
I think is an interesting note, because certainly what I see, oh, here's one more A, thinking about it, but didn't know where to start. Yeah. And Nicole has an additional 3A, 2B. Yeah, so it's definitely a mix. And in terms of the age question, I've certainly seen this, and you probably have too in your practice, that sometimes people feel at first like they're being forced into a gig work situation because of a layoff or a shift in their industry. They're in their 50s or 60s. They need and want to continue working for pay. And they maybe they were in an industry that has a real sort of bias toward younger workers. And even, you know, there's sort of documented stuff where when the manager is in their 30s and they're interviewing someone in their 50s or 60s to work for them, there's sometimes a dynamic there that, oh, here's another interesting comment. Contemplating a career change, forced, might not promote in the military and be forced out, interested in the flexibility of a gig economy job rather than rigid 9 to 5.
Nice,
great. A sort of variety between the I'm curious and the I'm feeling like the world or my career is going to force me into it.
Well, here's the good news. Research says that whether that if it's a preferred choice, people are much happier than they were when they were working that typical 9 to 5 job. And if it's out of necessity, they're no more unhappy than they were already. So it's a win-win. There was a huge research study in US and Europe really looking at the gig economy, and it is expected by 2027 to be almost 50% of the workforce. It is growing exponentially. It's growing now, and there's pros and cons, which I'm going to talk to you about in terms of benefits, in terms of workers' rights. But what the point that I'm hoping that I'm getting across to you today is that if you're the one driving it, even if it's out of necessity, that you are piecing together your life and being proactive rather than reactive, you can find a really fulfilling career this way. So working that 9 to 5 for that single employer really bears little resemblance to how people are living today. And millions of people are assembling these income streams. They're working independently rather than these structured payroll jobs. And as I mentioned, it's hardly a new phenomenon. In fact, this sort of on-demand economy has been around before, and the norms are continuing to change to support independent work. And to better understand the independent workforce, and if anybody is really into data, they could look at the McKinsey Global Institute, and they researched over 8,000 people, and they asked where did they get their income over the last 12 months, and looking at their primary work as well as income generating activities. So while they didn't say how much were you making, they were looking at income generating activities and satisfaction. And it's up to 162 million people are working in Europe and the United States. 20 to 30% are working in some form of independent work. And as I mentioned, it's going to be about 50% in the future. And so they're called a million things, right? Gig workers, free agents, contractors, part-time, but it's really putting the pieces together. So how do you do this? And what's in it for you? So the first thing, as we talked about, is diversifying income streams. So if anything, if you lose a job or you get hours are cut back, you still have other things, other ways to bring in income and support yourself. You're also less dependent on any one place for that work identity or validation. But there's a lot of non-monetary things that you can get from working in the gig economy, a lot of networking and job opportunities. So if you think about working in more than one arena and for more than one place, you're going to have more inputs and more touch points where more people will meet you and your network will just automatically enlarge. It's also a great way, as I mentioned, for the person who wanted to move into the UX and the gentleman that just talked about leaving the military, as a way to test drive a new career or job. So if you're curious about something before you go back to school or throw out a whole job search, is there a way to take on a project or offer to do something in a smaller way so you can see what it's like? And in a minute, I'm going to talk to you about how you can do that. And by working in the gig economy, you're expanding your skills and you can stay more relevant and marketable and easier to seamlessly move from one opportunity to the next. So the advantages of being in the gig economy, even in one small area, and expanding beyond just a full-time job or 2 part-time jobs or 3 part-time jobs, is this huge way to expand your network and expand your skills. So it might be by necessity in the current moment, but it might be setting you up for future opportunities that you would never have had you not had to piece together a few things. So the pros and cons. One is identity. And as you might have gathered from my personality, Leslie's introduction, I do a variety of things, and I don't have my sole identity with one job. Growing up, I used to say, I just wish I knew what I wanted to be. I just want to be a dentist. And then I could call myself a dentist. Or I just wish I was an artist, but I'm an artist. I'm a mom to 2 teenagers. I'm a career coach and counselor. I'm a speaker. I'm a trainer. And I'm in the HR department of a corporate firm. So I'm not just a corporate person. I'm not just an artist. And there's some people, though, and it's not right or wrong, whose natural temperament is much more linear in their thinking and much more, you want that identity. And for those of you who are on this call that might have job insecurity right now, part of the reason that it might feel so bad is that you're not just losing a job, but you're also losing a piece of you, that identity that you've identified with. Leslie just gave me a pop-up. I thought she had said it was a man getting out of the military, but it's a woman. So I wasn't trying to be a gender insensitive. But so thank you for that, Leslie. Feel free to chime in. The other are the benefits, and depending on what your situation is. So I was in a fortunate, privileged U.S. situation where my husband is a professor. I will say that he just got a pay cut, and his job is not as secure as it was, but because of that, he had the benefits. So I had the luxury of starting my independent career counseling career and speaking career, and I wasn't as dependent on an employer to give me those benefits. Not everybody has that luxury. And I also want to take a minute to say that this entire talk on working in the gig economy and creating a portfolio career is biased towards the US job search and the US market. So I know that there's many international students at Tufts and people calling in from all over the world, but there's still ideas that you can use for wherever you're living on this. But this is sort of a US-based gig economy presentation. So how many benefits do you need? Do you have access to benefits? What's the minimum you could work at a certain place for benefits? And also, how much structure and predictability do you need? Is it exciting to do something different? Is it exciting to have a variety of activities in your life on a weekly basis? Or does it get overwhelming? Is it too many emails? Are you having to switch gears? So I will say working with multiple income streams is not for everybody. Some people just want to do one thing at a time, which is okay. But maybe you think about that your hobby slowly over time could turn into an extra little source of income. Also, how organized and disciplined are you? So as I was mentioning with the freelance type work, you're out creating your own, generating your own business. And that does take some discipline and organization. I have to do my own taxes. I have to follow up on emails with clients. Which is why if you want to do this, but you're not as organized and disciplined, perhaps using one of the gig platforms to help you out can work better. And then the other is, what is your personality? So depending on what it is that you want to do. So I work with a woman who is a graphic designer, and she has a variety of clients. So she doesn't work for any one person. She has different projects, ranging from one big project that might last a couple months to sort of piecing together 5 different smaller projects in any given month. But she spends so much time alone in her apartment. When this whole social isolation happened, she said, I have no idea what you're talking about. I've been sheltering in place for the last 15 years. So depending on how extroverted you are. So sometimes it's not a one and done. You might start this, and if you find yourself working alone too much and you're more of an extrovert, this is how I met Leslie. I joined professional associations. I had one of my gigs was working for an outplacement firm, so I got to walk into an office a couple days a week, and then it wasn't hard being alone. So really thinking about, where do you get your identity? Is it just through your work? How many benefits do you need? Are you alone? Do you have a support system? Structure, predictability, all of these things go into thinking about piecing together a portfolio career. Any questions before I move on?
Yes, thanks for checking. one person wrote in, what advice do you have for international students who have to consider their visas and limitations that come with that?
That's a good one. And Leslie, I'll have you chime in too for working with international students. I think that you have an extra layer of security, job security that goes, depending on where, is this for people who want to live in the US, worried about visa?
They didn't say that, but that's my guess. And what happens is, of course, different people are in different situations. You know, if you're a new graduate, your work has to be connected to your major, at least to some degree, with a special extension to your visa. If people are beyond that, like I'm working with someone who is on an H-1B, where not that we're experts on visas, but that means he has, I think it's like 5 years or something like that. And then his as a regular work visa in the US, but it is tied to that specific employer, and he is not happy with his job. So his job search in COVID is not only looking for companies that are hiring, and he has a lot of technical and very solid skills, engineering training. So he definitely has marketable skills that people are hiring for, but some of the firms have a freeze right now. Some of them say, oh, we're not going to deal, we're too small, we're not going to deal with even a simple visa, because the new employer would need to sponsor him right away for the H-1B. And in his case, and people in that visa situation, if they do get laid off, they have a very short time window to get a new gig. Yeah. So it is a little more complicated, although your basic, I would certainly say to anyone with a visa or international situation, having a small side gig can still be helpful as a way to build skills, build portfolio.
Yeah, and I'll add to that. So I will admit, and there's some other questions coming up about startup businesses, but we might wait till the end, is the concept of having multiple ways to express yourself. Doesn't matter where you live. So if you are somebody working as an accountant, I know right now at my accounting firm that there is somebody on the side that's a circus performer, you know, people teaching foreign language classes, somebody teaching art classes to children. So to ask yourself yes, you might be dependent on getting somebody to sponsor you, and that is not my conversation how to do that. But it doesn't matter if you're working full-time for somebody, you still could do other things on the side. I work with somebody from Nigeria who is a pharmacist. He was not able to get full-time work, so he got contract work as a pharmacist. He drives an Uber, and his wife is very creative, and she does hair braiding. And he's also doing a small research project for a professor. So that is an example of somebody who's from another country, sort of piecing it together. Okay, so as I was mentioning though, the bigger your network, the more opportunities you're going to have. And who knows, one of those coworkers could lead you to another job. And you can test the waters. And as you are growing by balancing two jobs, you're actually improving your skills. So if you can't find full-time employment in your chosen field, which might be true for you, you could at least choose a job that teaches skills sort of focused on your target. So if you wanted to be, let's say, a video game animator, pick a second job editing videos rather than flipping burgers. And you know, maybe you can't find full-time employment as a designer, but work at a t-shirt printing business where they need stencil designs in your free time versus waiting tables. So you can find a gig that's adjacent to the kind of work that you want to do. And then there's all the administration and taxes. And I think a more technical conversation came in about opening their own business, but we're going to hold that to the end. So how do you begin? How do you start this process? And one is really thinking about, I'm going to go back to my last slide. How do you engage in the world? So are you someone who likes doing a variety of things? And are you bought into the concept that you can no longer just count on one employer for life? So part of being open to this gig economy is being bought into the concept that it's okay to not just have one identity and one job. You're not your job title, you're not your place of work. The next part is to really look at, can you arrange your life to make this work? Are you comfortable meeting new people? You know, do you have, you might need to go off and get information on how is this going to impact you if you work for yourself, self-employment taxes. I just did mine and it wasn't pretty, which is why I decided, wow, my anchor gig, my seeing individual clients as my main thing needs to become smaller, and I need a bigger anchor gig. So you can be constantly reinventing yourself. So how do you begin? So the first thing you do is ask yourself, this is so easy, what comes naturally to you? Just what are your favorite parts of your job? And if you have kids, who were you before kids? You know, what do people compliment you on? Something that comes so naturally to you, you might be overlooking as a marketable skill or something that somebody will pay you for. Ask your friends and family the following questions. So if you have a pen with you, you can write it down. I can send these to Leslie and Nicole, and they can send them to you after. Ask them, what do you see as my best strengths? That's question number one. What qualities do you think I bring to a work situation? Number two. And if you don't work with somebody, what qualities do you imagine I would bring to a work situation? And what careers would you see me doing if I wasn't doing what I currently am? So again, what are your strengths? What qualities do you bring? And what careers do they see you doing if you weren't doing what you currently are? Sometimes we can't get outside of ourselves, and other people can see what we're capable of in a way that we cannot. And then look around at case studies that you already know. So it's almost like if you're driving a car and you're thinking of buying, I don't know, a Honda, all of a sudden you'll start noticing all the Hondas on the freeway. Or if you're getting a new roof on your house, you'll start noticing roofs. Same thing with this. If you are suddenly open to the concept of a gig career, working in the gig economy or having a portfolio career, you are going to start noticing that most people within your network right now will have 12 or so people within your network already working in the gig economy. So next time you're out on a virtual, I say out, next time you're in on a virtual Zoom call, ask people, you know, do you have any side gigs? Have you ever worked more than one job? How did you do it? How did you, you know, just start asking, and you will start noticing and seeing just automatic case studies of people that are doing this. Then you need to really think about your lifestyle and your needs. How will this work arrangement serve you? So rather than I'm being forced into this because I'm a certain age, how will this serve you? Does it give you a certain sense of flexibility? Does it allow you to test out a skill that you have never been able to do? Does it allow you to be home in the afternoons and work in the evening where you couldn't at a traditional 9-to-5 job? Leslie mentioned my design thinking. I teach design thinking as a way to look beyond use this technique as a way to look beyond sort of the traditional way of viewing work. There's a wonderful book called Designing Your Life by Bill Burnett and Dave Evans, and they have a new book out called Designing Your Work Life. And if you're thinking about redesigning your work life, I highly recommend that book as a way to take sort of the introduction that I'm giving you today into the gig economy and actually use some of their exercises to really think about if you had full control over how you design your life, how do you want to design your work life? And then the next part, which is what we're going to work on next, is starting some research. So I love any kind of job search that starts in your pajamas. So I call this your pajama work. And you can start researching gig platforms. So there's hundreds of gig platforms. There's well-known ones, as I've mentioned, like Upwork, Fiverr. There's a lot of niche ones too, though. So one of the questions is, well, how do you find an online platform that relates to your business? Because I'm in career coaching, somebody else might be in sales, somebody else might be in design, somebody else might be in, I don't know, statistics. So you can start by doing a straight search, and that straight search is simply typing in on Google contract work for X. So you'd look for a gig platform for accountants or contract work for accountants. I'm thinking about accountants right now because I'm doing it. And then a gig platform is going to match that contract worker and company who hires contract staffers. So many of these gig economy platform sites might require you to get paid through the site, so you'd get that's how they make their money, and it's not directly through the employer. And you're going to have to research that. There's no one size fits all. Some are going to charge a small fee, upfront fee for like a background check. But some examples of the most popular ones. Upwork and Fiverr are really good if you're in more of the creative graphic design, marketing, audio programming, voiceovers, that type. FlexJobs has entry level to executive. There's all types of flex jobs. Elance is more IT, web, mobile, marketing, creative operations. Guru is sales enablement. LinkedIn Profile Finder used to be around. Leslie, do you know if it's still around where you can pay $60 a month to post and respond to jobs?
I don't know. I know it was a couple of years ago, but I haven't
Okay,
checked.
so you might, these are things, they're always coming up. And then people per hour where some AI will match somebody's request and you can send in proposals. So this is just a idea, but I would just type in contract work, gig platforms for your type of work. And then there's going to be niche gig platforms depending on the type of work that you do. So you may also want to dig around sort of beyond that general to see if there's a contract platform that specifically focuses on your niche. Again, back to networking. As you're off networking with other people, ask them, do you know of any platforms for working in the gig economy? So I've included a few here, but a simple web search is going to determine whether or not there's a platform made for your industry. So it might be something like contract data analytics job platform, or you could use that backdoor trick as if you were hiring, as if you were the hiring company and you could just write hire sales contractors. And if there's something, if there's a platform, it's going to come up on the first or second page. And as I mentioned, ask your network, simply say you're interested in expanding your work to include more A, B, and C, and you're looking for the best gig platforms. And that A, B, and C is going to be part of that new elevator pitch that you're going to need to be working on. So the action step, go ahead.
Yeah, we have an interesting question that's come in, and you can tell me if this is a good spot to voice it. This is someone who says, Ingrid, like you, I have a corporate job and a creative side business. I find that I'm often trying to hide the creative business from my corporate life, since my impression is that the creative side gig makes it seem as if I'm less serious or less focused on the corporate job, that you're not committed. Is that something you've experienced? Do you have thoughts on how to handle it? And I get this concern from people sometimes. So what are your thoughts?
Thank you so much for speaking directly to my heart. So I will say that I absolutely relate to what you're saying. For years, and this is why I'm so passionate about this topic, I didn't believe that I could have a combined kind of integrated life. So I had my corporate, where I'd wear the business suit, then I'd put on my leopard high tops and go off to my art studio, and then I had my art friends. And then I realized that so much of my creative side informs how I'm able to think strategically, how I'm able to contribute. And the fact that I work at an accounting firm, like the least on the surface, you know, the most traditional, and yet right here in my office, I will show you a piece of my artwork right now, my Converse tennis shoe made out of recycled radiator covers. I have chosen to bring my full self to work. So while other people have pictures of the Cape on their walls, I have a funkier background. You can see a little of my art behind me. And I actually worked though with a career coach on how to create language to integrate both my work as an artist with my work as a professional. And they really helped me come up with a way to say that what sets me apart from the traditional career counselor or business professional is that because I'm an artist, I'm able to see patterns and possibilities in things and new ways of doing things that others cannot. And that is what my sweet sauce, my special sauce is. So I think that there is a way to bring both. And this goes back to an issue with thought tapes. So one action step that anybody on here can do is, what are those stories we tell ourselves that stop us from even going to this next level? So right now, as you're listening to me, what are the stories you're telling yourself about the gig economy? I can't do this because I need a visa. I can't do this because it'll look that I'm too scattered. It seems too hard. Whatever those thought tapes are, and then turn it into a question. How can I wonder who is from another country who's doing who needs a visa and has other gigs. I wonder how to find them. I want to connect with other Tufts alumni, not from this country, to connect with them and see if they ever did. So turn your thought tapes into a question. Ask yourself, what are you already giving away for free? So what is it that comes so naturally to you that you're already doing and giving away for free? So are you the go-to person for editing people's papers, or for organizing, or to throwing a great party as an event planner, maybe math tutoring, cooking, resume writing? Is there a way to start charging for your time and services? Who already charges for what you give away for free? And maybe you connect with them to find out how they got started. So I think that's a really simple way to consider doing a few informational interviews with people that are charging. So you have to bake. There's a lot of baking going on right now in homes. But maybe you've always loved baking and cake decorating. Well, people are getting paid to bake and cake decorate. So why not you? A question came up, Leslie. Should I answer that now, or is that something we can do in the last 15 minutes?
Which?
I don't know. I keep getting pop-ups, so I'm gonna. All right, I'll keep going. The other is to very simple. These are simple steps, right? You're in your pajamas looking at gig platforms. You're thinking to yourself, what am I already giving away for free? You are talking to friends and family to say, hey, what's special about me that I'm missing? Or what other jobs could I do? The next thing is to expand your conversations to generate new inputs, ideas, leads, and connections. So when people say to you, what do you do? Rather than just say, I'm Director of Talent Advancement at a consulting firm, I say, I help people feel better about their work. And, or I say, I teach people the skills to be in charge of their career. And I do that as the Director of Talent Advancement at a consulting firm. And I also do that through speaking at various organizations and universities. And in fact, I love my speaking gigs and I'm looking to do more. There's my little plug, by the way, everybody who's on here. So talk to people that you know, join a group in your field of interest. So if you're interested in moving into career coaching, join an online group at the moment. Soon it'll be live on career coaching. Go to the Venture Cafe if you're interested in entrepreneurship in Cambridge, if you live in the area. So you want to go and network with people who either are doing what you're doing or those that would use your services, who would use an editor. So if you are not in that business, you will stand out. So I've gone to networking events with doctors, and you think, what does a career coach have to do with doctors? But the reality is people go for their physical. And when they go for their physical and their doctor says, how are you doing? If they're not happy, they'll burst into tears and say, I hate my job. And guess what? They think to send them to me. And I've gotten a lot of referrals that way. So that's a way. I know somebody who was an editor and a writer, but wanted to become a health coach, got trained through some online health coach, and teamed up with a doctor to say, could I work in your office and see people that need ongoing counseling and support above and beyond what you can offer. So there's creative ways to start doing this. And start practicing a new elevator pitch. So I know, Leslie, I'm sure that you guys have different offerings on how to create a pitch. But think about how to expand your pitch. So maybe you say, I'm in sales enablement, but I'm really interested in data analytics. And in fact, I'm currently taking a course in X, Y, and Z, and I'm looking for opportunities and projects where I can offer my services. So you're focusing on where you're going versus where you've been. So true or false? Here's my next polling question. Do you believe, knowing yourself, that you have to have sort of all your ducks in a row, that you have to have a really clear plan before you can take action?
Also, Ingrid, there's a couple of questions we might want to check in on after you talk about the poll.
Great. All right. How are we doing?
Do you see responses, Nicole?
Yes, let me show those to you.
Okay, a lot of people think that they need to have a clear plan. Others say no, and some haven't decided yet. So one reason why I think design thinking is such an important skill to have is there is a bias to action. So you take action, you test something out, even if you don't know what's going to happen, even if you don't know where it's going to lead you. And for many people, that's difficult. It's like, well, I don't want to waste my time if I don't know how it's going to turn out. Or if I don't know exactly if I'm going to like this, I don't want to try it. And it's sort of this circular thinking. So I really want to encourage you that you do not have to have a clear plan to take an action step, to test the waters. And if you feel overwhelmed by the next step, think about the smallest next step that you can take. So Leslie's going to ask a few questions. I have just a couple more slides, and then I'm going to open it up to questions.
Yeah, and I just had a quick comment about that, which is a wonderful book called Working Identity. She talks about how you have to be sure that that step that you take is of an appropriate size. So she says, no, you don't take all your savings and buy the wine bar. That's not your first step. Your first step might be more research, more talking to people who have wine bars, or it might even be working in a little side part-time gig at a wine bar. I once had a client who came to me, and he was an accountant and bookkeeper, and he said, well, what I really want to have is I want to manage my own bar. He says, you probably talk to a lot of people like that. I said, no, I do not. Tell me more. And it turned out he had an entire plan already in place. He just wanted me to say, yes, this is a great plan. He already had the plan. Talk to a number of bar managers and owners, get a part-time gig at a bar just as a bartender, find a way to do my accounting, bookkeeping work on a part-time basis as a transition mode. I mean, it was beauty. He even had a whole vision of like how to get more connected to his neighborhood bars as a customer so he could make friends with the owners. I said, you have the plan. You don't need me. Goodbye. You know, call me if you need me. But that was a great example of, yeah, you find a small action to take. He was unusual in having the whole plan worked out.
Actually, Leslie, I'm going to piggyback on that before you throw out your questions. Both of these are bar related. So I had a client who worked in sales, really had, there was a lot of management changes, wasn't happy, didn't know what he wanted to do next. And he said, someday I'm going to open a corner bar. And I said, tell me more about that. He's like, well, I want to be part of the community. I get to be home. You know, we're the ones sponsoring the baseball team, you know, everything that's happening in town. And so what I got out of that is, oh, so you'd love to be working closer and be more involved in your community. Yes. So that one, him just being willing to say out loud, someday I'd like to do this, led to the discussion of what could he do right now to be more involved in his community. So his tiny little action step was to start coaching. And I said, well, what would it look like to open your bar now? Why do you have to wait till someday? And then of course he had all his thought tapes. And I said, move your thought tapes aside. What would be the immediate tiny next step? You don't have a clear plan like Leslie's person. He's like, well, I guess I said, do you go to a corner bar that you like? He said, yes. I said, do you know who owns it? No. I said, well, why don't you find out who owns it and ask them how they got started? So here we are. He ended up deciding that he did want to start his own business. It wasn't going to be a bar. It was going to be in his town. And he actually bought a locksmith franchise. And he went through one little tiny step after the next. And he is so happy. So it's all about that tiny first step. So I'm going to have one more slide. And I'm going to then invite you all to pick one tiny little step. Leslie, you said there's a couple of questions.
Yep. This is one that I hear from other people sometimes. And this person says, how concerned should you be about letting your corporate employer know you have an outside business income? You know, my own experience is that it really depends. Yes, the world is changing. As Ingrid says, the norms are very, very much changing over the past 10 years, 15 years. And there are different corporate cultures and there's different beliefs that managers have. So it's a sort of an it depends situation, I think. But what do you think, Ingrid?
I think it's a depends, and I'll give 3 concrete examples and maybe a way that you can explore this. So when I was looking for this job, they knew that I had my own business, and they said, what are your plans? And I said, well, my plan is that this job, of course, will be my first and foremost priority. And I will make sure that none of my ongoing, none of my ongoing projects will impact the work that I do. There might be times during a lunch hour that I'm doing a webinar for somebody else, but I'll also be promoting your business, and it's a win-win. So I've been able to negotiate this, and I have a few clients on the side, but I've turned away a lot of clients just because my work is too busy. I know somebody, and you'd think working at the Cambridge Innovation Center, that would be one of the most creative places around. And they were very against, like, if you have a side job, then that means it's coming away from work that you could be doing for us. And you had to report it and you got less money. So I agree with Leslie that it is part of the culture. But one thing you could do is just plant a seed. It's moving right into my next slide. And you could say, hey, I'm curious about what the policy is on X, Y, and Z. Or is there a policy? Or what do you think about X, Y, and Z? The reality is there's honesty and brutal honesty. If you're not stealing clients from people, or you're not going into direct competition, what you do in your free time on your weekends or at night, if you decide that you're teaching ballet or doing somebody's taxes, then it really comes down to, why do they need to know? Do they need to know? They would need to know if it's impacting. So I do know somebody at work that wanted to do some side taxes on their own. And they said, these are not clients that would come to the firm. Do I have your permission? So I think it is but don't assume in your mind the answer.
I was just going to add, and that's a great example. If it's in a similar or same type of business, be careful that you're not using work resources. Don't use your work email, even small things like that. You really need a boundary. Even if you're being open about it, you need to keep that boundary about resources.
So I have a friend at another college who's in a similar role to Leslie, and she has a side practice where she does a few speaking gigs on career development topics just under her own business. So she's not promoting it under the college, and she sees a couple private clients. So it really does depend. So I'm on my last slide, and this goes back to planting a seed, or is what is that thing you would want to do next and get paid for, even if it's not going to turn into your full-on business. And as I said, there's ways to rewrite your elevator pitch, but when you're reaching out to, I think, don't you have a LinkedIn thing on Wednesday on networking with alums? Right, so maybe a question is, I'm thinking of creative ways for utilizing my background working in development for nonprofits. And I'm a really strong project manager and writer, and I could imagine lending my support to donor-related events or grant writing. I see that you work in the grant writing field. How would somebody like me get into that to test out a project? So find somebody, an alum. Alums will talk to alums doing some work that interests you. Maybe that's the side gig you want to add. Maybe that's what you want to transition towards, and ask for their advice. If I wanted to get some exposure and experience, do you know how I could get a contract? Do you know? So ask somebody who works. If somebody came to me and said, do you ever hire contract accountants at your firm? I'd say yes. During tax season, sometimes we get really busy, and we do bring on contract people for 4 months. So many people would assume, oh, you can't do that, but you actually can. So plant a seed with the people that you already know or that you're networking with. And the one thing that I do not have a slide for is this type of work really does come from networking with other people. So if you're somebody, and this goes with the full job search, sitting alone, looking online, looking up part-time job in X, Y, and Z and applying is not the way to bring in different opportunities your way. You really do need to get out and start that conversation. Leslie, I know I covered a lot of information quickly. I talked to you about the changing world of work and the changing norms. I talked to you about different ways to have gigs, whether it's through a gig platform, whether it's through the same title, but just sort of a different relationship, whether it's freelance, whether you have your anchor bread and butter and then a few little side things. I talked to you about ways to do some research in terms of looking at different gig platforms and starting to think about what you're already giving away for free and talking to those that already know you on what you might be able to monetize. And my next steps might be as simple as look in your own network and say, I wonder if somebody else is doing something besides this full-time job. Talk to each other after. What else are you guys doing? There were a few people at the beginning that said, yes, I have more than one income. So I wish I could have another hour just to brainstorm and talk to you about that. But I'd love to take some questions so I can be respectful of everybody's time. And I will leave you with what is one immediate tiny next step you can do to move forward in exploring if you want to work in the gig economy or create a portfolio career. Doesn't have to be huge. It's just one tiny step.
Well, Ingrid, I'm watching the questions line, and I will say one comment that just sort of triggered something in my mind is I also, on the side of my Tufts job, official Tufts job, my anchor gig, I have a small private practice. And one of the things I was thinking of doing in this economy was reaching out to my neighbors. I'm in a community of 27 households, a neighborhood, and telling them, oh, a lot of you have young adult kids, recent grads that are back home staying with you or in transitions of different kinds. Let them know that I'll give them a free consult as a neighbor. Well, I might actually have, 10 or 15. There might be a lot of these, so I may be spacing them out. But guess what? That will feel good to me in my neighborhood and with my friends, and those people might refer their friends, which would then be paying business. And I have other paying clients, but it's another interesting way when you think about what you're giving away for free. Sometimes there's an in-between step of asking the people that you're doing it for free for to actively tell their friends that you're going to start doing this. And the other small point I was going to make was I had a client who her side gig was doing incredibly creative cakes. They were like the fanciest of the fancy that you've seen, sculpture, edible things on the top. But what she ended up deciding was that she liked the entrepreneurship and the creativity, but she needed a more corporate anchor gig for benefits and for pay and stability. So she went from being her day job as a clinical social worker, using that middle entrepreneurial cake thing, and becoming a marketing executive. And there were some steps along the way, but a lot of it was self-teaching the technical skills and then building the confidence to say, I built this cake business, I can build your business. And now she's moved it around sort of full circle, where she's a senior marketing executive for a healthcare related, mental health related firm. So, and that wasn't at all where she started out. So you never know where that side gig with the cakes might lead. Yeah, go ahead.
Add to that, Leslie, because I thought you were going to say she started doing it, so she left being a social worker and took a job at a bakery to really learn, but that's how somebody else might go about it, to say, you know what, I'm going to see what happens on the inside to see if what I think I love doing as a hobby is actually something I want to do all day long. So, you know, there's so many people doing, you know, already. Do you love biking? Do you already do triathlons? Maybe you want to coach people on how to do triathlons. Maybe you start by putting together a small group, and then you think in the back of your mind, I've always wanted to be a trainer, and that's a gig. And, you know, then the thought tape is, I'll never make enough money as a trainer. And I say, turn it around to, who are people that are working full-time as trainers? How did they do it? How much money do they make? What can you do differently? So my ending thing, and then I'll take all the questions, is really pay attention to those stories you tell yourself, and then turn it into a question.
Right.
So what are the questions, Leslie?
Well, one person said they missed the introduction by coming in a little bit late, and just had a question about whether there was career coaching available for Tufts alumni to help them take some of these beginning steps, or figure out what their beginning steps could be, or next steps could be in their own gig career. And I say, yes, Art Sciences and Engineering, School of the Museum of Fine Arts. We have individual career coaching, no charge, and you can access it by going to our website, Alumni Career Services, and go from there. And the next question is, my next step is to realign my values to my vision and actions towards strengths. I'd like to ask my colleagues and friends who know me what they see that I can do beyond what I'm doing now. I'd value their insights and perspectives about alternative gigs. Yeah, so it's sort of a commentary. And I like the way, Ingrid, that you phrased those questions. And I always tell people it's so powerful to hear the answers live, like on the phone or on video. However, you do want to have it recorded, because when you're being flooded with positive feedback, the brain does not retain it very well. You want it word for word. You want to really capture it. Or if people are really too far away, too busy, you can get it by email or text. That's okay. But there's something so powerful about hearing the voices talking about your gifts and strengths. So my other thought. And I hope some of you who have some of these questions about your anchor gig, your corporate identity, your other identity, will bring those complicated questions to our LinkedIn webinar next week, because it's complicated in terms of branding and marketing, especially if the side gig you is totally different. As Ingrid said, it took her work. And Ingrid, I liked how you shared that you had to work at it and get an outside coach to help you to integrate and find a way to make your story fit together.
But I will say, and there's questions popping up, and I know we're ending, but I will say that the minute I claimed both, you know, I stopped hiding that the artist part of me, is I suddenly got all kinds of speaking things on design thinking, working in the gig economy. I got more clients that wanted help with design thinking. So there's something about being more integrated. There's a pop-up that keeps coming up about if I should start my own business and to get income.
When should you form a business to receive revenue versus just collecting cash as an individual?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I will not give you the correct full answer. I'll tell you what I did and I'll tell you your resource. So if you're in the Boston area, there's an organization called SCORE, and they will match you with a free business mentor, and they will help you work on, if you want to do your own business, what you can do at what stage. With my own independent business, Mosaic Careers, for years, I didn't even have a doing business as. I just had kept really good records and ran my business. And then as I started doing more speaking gigs, I finally did a doing business as. So I'm not somebody to say, oh, you need to, I would talk to an accountant, because really what it comes down to is, how are you going to get the most money when tax time comes around? So I think getting, this is a type of thing to get some business advice, but you don't have to pay somebody. Go to get a coach or find somebody who has their own business in something similar to what you want to do and ask them, how did you get started? At what point did you incorporate? What are some of the loopholes, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I know we're at 2:17. I just want to second that about getting advice, because, there could be, in some businesses in different areas, there could be liability or legal issues. You just want to be sure you're protected. And it could be that it's totally simple and people just pay you and you can declare it on your taxes, but good to get advice.
And we have the SCORE treasurer with us. So hello, and I'm glad I gave you guys a plug. You do a great service.
So that's all the questions that I see. And again, the recording for folks that weren't able to attend the whole thing, or if you want to review it, the recording will be available at alumniandfriends.tufts.edu/build your career. But you can Google Tufts Alumni Career Services and you'll come up with all kinds of good information and resources, including a link to our recorded webinars, which have a YouTube channel, as well as new topics that will be coming up. So thank you very much, Ingrid. And it's always helpful to hear your personal stories as well as client stories. And quick question that's come in: how do we get set up with career counseling from Tufts? You can call our main number, which is 617-627-3299. And our office manager will get you set up and scheduled. So thank you all. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for your thoughtful questions, raising your own individual issues, which hopefully are also helpful and interesting to others. And thank you, Ingrid.
And thank you for having me. And I just want to say that just like whatever your thoughts are about this time, this is a really exciting time to, if there's ever a call for creativity, it's now. And there's a lot of opportunity to do a lot of different things. So if not now, when, right? So it's important that you live fully and tap into all the different parts of you and your different skills. And if you need more examples of people that have successfully done this, talk to some more career coaches. I'm happy to give any kind of lecture to anybody looking for design thinking, gig economy. I love speaking. And I do have insights into sort of blending together these disparate parts of yourself, especially being, an artist on one side and an accountant on the other. But you'd be surprised how many people are living very unique lives. And I think when you fully come to the table, you're much more engaging and people like being around you. So I think stop hiding from yourself and start getting paid for what you do already. Thank you.
Thank you, Ingrid.
Thank you so much. Can't wait to hear how this, your next steps.
Bye-bye.
Bye.